Hello everyone, welcome to Human Needs. I'm Marcus Packard with my brother Dr. Powell Packard, and we are here to discuss how we can align humanity towards a shared goal so that we can avoid human extinction. For that, we must stop the never-ending race to sacrifice a long-term common good for the short-term personal advantage in our competition for jobs, clients, and resources. And so that's what we do in this podcast in multiple different ways. Specifically, today, what we're going to do is talk about the general view that we will always have in this podcast, which is understanding that human beings have fundamental needs and that they cannot develop properly and stay mentally and physically healthy if those needs are not met. And so what that leads to is when people understand that concept, it changes the way we see society and we see other people, in the sense that we understand that there are external factors that determine whether a person is going to become or stay an asset to society or a liability, whether they develop pathologies and they will become either a burden or a danger to everyone else because their needs have not been met, and so they develop those pathologies, or they become contributors to society and even heroes because they become the best versions of themselves because all their needs have been met. So that understanding leads people to take responsibility for others instead of just saying, well, it's their business and everyone gets their own fate, and that's look at what you're doing and make sure you're doing the right thing and not worry about the others, which is what we're trying to change here, because we all have to take responsibility, because other people are gonna, if not, ruin it for everyone else, right? So we are a social organism. That understanding that we are a superorganism and trying to become more so one. And so we are all interdependent, and we can't just, no man is an island. We can't just ignore what other people do and just see to focus on what we're doing. We have to help everyone become the best versions of themselves, because that will also, if not, everyone it'll hurt everybody if not. And everyone will benefit if we do that. So that's the idea. So today what I'm going to do, I don't know if you want to say something about that.
Oh, that's great. It's brilliant. Yeah, very well explained.
Well, you heard it from Dr. Powell Packard. Yeah, just go ahead and cut in if you want. So the presentation today, so as you guys see, the idea is that if a man does not know what port he's heading for, no wind is favorable to him. Right? This is an idea. This is something that Socrates said. Seneca
the Elder. Seneca the Elder.
Who was Seneca?
Good question. So I was asking you before, I'm guessing I think he's a historian, a Greek, or he's one of the Greek philosophers, maybe. Okay. Or it sounds sort of like one of the Roman writers, maybe. Like one of the theater writers.
Okay.
Playwriters, like one of the Roman playwriters. That they were inspired a lot by Greek philosophy too. Seneca. I think he was, that's why that's what my guess is. He's a Roman writer. I'm guessing that.
Okay. So,
but it'd be interesting to look into that.
So Seneca said, whoever he was, that if we don't know where we're going, then we can't do anything right. Basically, that's the idea, right? And so we have to know where we're going. We have to know what's the objective. What are we trying to do here? Like what's good and what's bad? That's basically what it boils down to, is understanding what is good and what is bad, right? And the idea is that because, if not, we're just going to walk right off a cliff, which is what we're doing today in society, right? We're like blind people running around with nuclear weapons and bulldozers and just every extraordinary power, and we don't even know what we're doing. We don't even know what the objective is, right? We don't even know what the goal is, what we want to achieve with all this power, right?
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. I think if you would ask people, I mean, a lot of people, they might not have a clear goal in their life, but I guess also as a society, I think it's getting less and less clear what the goal is. I think economy, so I think like starting with maybe with the moral philosophers, economy has sort of substituted what is supposed to be our goals.
Right.
The economic system. At least in the more those countries that tradition belongs more to. But if not, you'd expect that the political leaders then are responsible to choose our goals for us. That's what's sort of
right. So hopefully this message will reach political leaders, and we do as much as we can to speak to them and reach out to them. So if you know any, share this video with them. That'd be wonderful. This idea here is kind of like where this helps. So the idea is society is a garden, right? And people as plants. Of course, people are not plants. But the idea is that it's the way we can understand that society is something that we can grow and provide the right environment, the right circumstances, and all the conditions that plants need to grow. Now, so when somebody has a garden, right? What they're constantly wondering about is, what do the plants need? What do the plants need to grow healthy and beautiful, right? And so that's like what a gardener is doing all the time, like providing the conditions and the environment for the plants to grow properly. And the idea is that that's what we should be doing as well, because essentially what society is kind of like a garden of people, right? And it's a garden of people. So what we want is we want everybody to flourish and become the best versions of themselves. And how do we do that? Well, for sure, we need to make sure that all their needs are met.
Yeah, I was just thinking that a garden is actually it goes way back, the metaphor of gardens, right? I think that's interesting.
Really?
Yeah, well, yeah, starting with the Garden of Eden and
that's way
goes
back.
way back.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
I hadn't thought of that. So another concept, like I mentioned in the beginning, is that humanity, we are a superorganism in the sense that what humanity can accomplish together is extraordinarily more the fact that we're together. Like an individual human being alone can be little more than a caveman. You take the most successful person in society today, or any of the successful people in society today, and you leave them naked in the jungle, and they will die within a week. Right? So they are completely dependent on society, just even more so or as much so as the bum in the street corner. I mean, they're equally, fully dependent on society. Not only that, so it's basically, like you take a cell of your body and you leave it somewhere, it's not gonna live very long, right? Well, it's similar. We are like cells of a superorganism. And the other idea is that but together we can accomplish so much, right? We can reach the moon. We can split atoms. We can fly from one side of the world to the other. We can create devices to be able to speak like we're doing now. Like all of these things, everything that we touch is thanks to the work of millions of people to like get that, all the resources involved in that, to extract all those resources, to transport all those resources, to transform all those resources. Every single process involved there requires millions of people, not only just to do the labor, but to provide all the machines and the devices to do that labor, and all the knowledge. So like, it's just, everything we touch has needed so much work from so many other people that we will never meet. And that's the demonstration that it's a product of a superorganism that no individual could ever do alone.
Yeah, and I was just thinking that so nowadays, obviously, we wouldn't be able to survive in the jungle, but I think just evolutionarily too, as social animals, just in the same way that, herd animals, if they're out of the herd in Africa, those are the ones that lions pick and so on. And that a lot of like if you go to primates and so on, they also need the group. It's
Right.
not just us because we're super civilized and so on. It's
Right.
I think it's just in our DNA as social mammals. Or there's other social organisms like ants also that just can't survive alone.
Which is why, as we're going to talk about later, most of our needs are psychological, and they have to do with this connection with others. Many of them have to do with this connection with others. And if someone is outcast, right? If you are like blocked from a community or kicked out of a group, it is actually as like the brain experiences it as if losing a member. Like it really is psychologically damaging, and it because it's as if we were losing a part of our body. Because we wouldn't survive if we were expelled from a group in the past.
Yeah, it's very hard to survive. I mean, it's all you can think about wolves, for example, or dogs, that they really don't want to be left alone, and they're the way they work is always hunting in packs, and they just do everything with cooperation. And being left alone is one of the, like when they leave dogs alone in an apartment, it's one of the things that makes them feel the worst, because they're just not, they're in their DNA, they're not designed to be alone. They always want to be part of a pack, and humans are not. They're more similar to primates and dogs, but I think there's similarities in that respect. Yeah.
So they're like these axioms. There's these set of principles that are very important to understand this point of view. And they're different from how traditional in economy, like we think of these things, right? These ideas that we're going to explain today, most of them, at least what I'm going to talk about, most of them are ideas from Manfred Max Neef, which was an economist of Chile. In the 70s, he wrote this book called Human Scale Development. And this is where he talks about this framework. And this is what I'm going to be talking about mostly. And so what this framework starts from is that human needs are finite, few, and classifiable. They're the same for everyone in all historical periods as well. And what defines basically a human need is that if they're not met, the people will develop pathologies. So these are like the three general ideas that they're like our framework built from that. And they're not so much like provable in the sense that they're axioms, is that you start with these ideas and then you see if they're useful. And they are very useful. So one of the nice things that's useful about this is that, so you can use, like scientifically, you can determine if something is a need or not, which will help us put us all in a shared goal, because we can use the methods of science to determine what are needs and what are not needs. And one of the interesting ways, different things of this framework as well, is that, so like economists usually they would say there's infinite amount of needs, but with this framework, the way we understand that like infinite longing or variability ambitions of humanity is that there are infinite amount of satisfiers. So like needs, there's a difference between needs and satisfiers. Needs are what is actually needed, and then there are different ways to satisfy those needs. We'll give examples. And the ways that people satisfy needs is what changes from different type of people, different eras, different cultures, but the needs are the same because we're all human. Just like the needs of roses are all the same.
Yeah. That's good. And I think it's interesting to think that you would talk about the science, right? So there's been a lot of research in the last century in different fields, psychology, economy, sociology. There's also evolutionary biology, like studies with primates and mammals. And I think all of those fields can help to understand what are the human needs, right? Humans understood as an animal, right? A mammal, a social animal, a primate. With of course we're a different species from chimpanzees, but I think all of those fields can help to identify the human needs. Yeah.
So in this slide, what I'm showing here, what I'm trying to depict is that what happens is that we have to stop changing the question. Like typically in our society, we look at people and we think, oh, do they deserve this or do they not deserve it? And like our whole social economic system is based on that. And this is what, as we were talking about earlier before, so like there's a movement trying to claim that there is no free will. And we may talk a bit about that later because we have views about that. We believe it's not an ideal way to go about this. But what they're trying to do is essentially flip the question instead of asking whether people deserve something, is to asking whether they need something. Like, and the reason for that is because, so for instance, there have been multiple studies on like genes that some of them were considered the like genes for that would cause aggression, right? And they found this gene, and for a while they thought, oh, so this gene, when people have it, it makes them terribly violent, right? And this gene is a cause of violence. But what they found then, is that studying it more carefully, is that what actually happens is that when people in their childhood or even as fetuses, if they're subjected to stressful situations and hardship and abuse, that's when they will develop this aggression that from that genetic situation, right? The phenotype will unfold a phenotype of aggression from a specific genotype. But with that same genotype, if that person, that fetus, that child is given everything they need emotionally and not abused, right, for at least that, right, then they become very prosocial people. And so the same, right? And so this is like the example I'm giving here, that depending on whether we provide children and even, mothers, pregnant mothers, what they need or not, their children will then develop and become, for instance, Joker or Mother Teresa. These are just random examples, but it's to get the point across. And so, in one case, the flower is blossoming, and in the other case, the plant is just not developing, right? If they're compared as plants, sorry.
Well, I think another striking thing here. I mean, the flower is a good metaphor, but in the case of Joker, you can see how it's not only that they're withering; it's that they're hurting other people too, right? They can be hurt themselves. They're not doing well, health, they won't grow themselves. But in the case of Joker, it's this. I do, and it's sort of sad. I think humans might be, compared to other animals, they might have more capacity to also be destructive too, and compared to plants, for example. Obviously.
Yeah. So absolutely. The reason why the reason why I like comparing it to plants is that the idea is that the Joker could have become a fully contributive to society.
I think the metaphor
right?
is good. I think that's also interesting to consider because it makes it more critical too.
Yes, absolutely.
So I was just going to ask you one thing. So MOA. So what in the slide? So.
You got me. No, I don't know what that is. I don't know how. That is the gene.
Oh, we can edit it out if not.
No, that's fine. That's the gene that was called like the gene of aggression.
Oh, okay. Oh, right. Okay.
So once again, the idea is that this way of looking at things not only helps us it completely changes the way we see the world and how we will relate to people. And so like the question again is like, it's not whether they deserve it. When we see a bum on the street or a punk, right, that is just obnoxious and destructive, right? The question isn't whether they deserve something. It's what do they need? What is it that they require biologically, physiologically, emotionally, psychologically to develop properly to become prosocial? And this also is something that is useful in relationships. So, because often, like what I've seen in couples is like when they start saying like what the other should be doing but isn't doing, or that the other is like behaving like isn't right. Like when you like that typical thing, they're wrong. Like that's but I didn't do anything wrong, and why are they mad at me, right? It's like, but when we start to understand that the reason why someone is upset isn't because it may have nothing to do with what we're doing. It is because they have a need, an emotional need that is not being satisfied. And instead of trying to argue with them to point out that they aren't being reasonable with whatever they're doing, right? What actually works is considering, wait, what is it that person needs right now? Often all they need is attention and affection. And then they will stop whatever, the argument will stop. And often also, not only this, but often just food. Like you wouldn't believe the amount of arguments that happen like before lunch. And there's actually been studies on this, like judges they give worse sentences before lunch instead of after lunch, right? And so when we have that view, right, it's like,
yeah,
it makes everything so much easier because you can find a solution, a real solution.
This reminds me, a checklist, if I remember correctly, from the Human Givens approach about what to do if you're feeling suicidal or if you're feeling really wrong. Human Givens approach. It's a school of psychology from Britain. The United Kingdom, and one, I remember, if I remember correctly, the checklist, one of them was take a shower, take a nap, eat, drink water, and so on. It's just like a quick checklist of things that you can do to maybe sort of help you regulate yourself emotionally and possibly feel better and not make any bad decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, like, sometimes instead of trying to argue with somebody, it's better just to be like, hey, want a glass of water, or let them rest a little bit, or give them a sandwich or something. Right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how do we see, right? I'm saying that here, that people develop pathologies if their needs are not met. And how can we see that scientifically? Like, how is that obvious? And one of the ways it's obvious is that when people's needs aren't being met, their emotional needs, they will be stressed out. Like they will start to have very high levels of stress or higher levels in stress. And what's been found very clearly is that stress increases almost all diseases, physical diseases. Like it's literally when we say that if your needs are not being met, your psychological needs aren't being met, it will lead to pathologies. It also leads to physical pathologies. Like it will also lead to actual physical disease. And so, heart disease, cancer, lung disease, accidents, cirrhosis, suicide, atherosclerosis, dementia, addiction, depression, impulsivity, impaired judgment, lack of empathy, premature death, insomnia, headaches, high blood pressure, diabetes, skin conditions, asthma, arthritis, anxiety, strokes, poor memory, learning difficulties. All of these things are increased if there are high levels of stress in a person, right? So the same way, all of these are reduced if we reduce the amount of stress. And how do we reduce the stress? We reduce that by meeting people's needs. And this is found not only in adults, like in us now. But it also, I mean, it absolutely is. But it's also found that if a fetus, even in the first trimester of the pregnancy, their mother is experiencing hardship and therefore stressed, that child, when they're an adult, will also have higher levels of all these difficulties. Like, so it's like, you know, it can be corrected, but it has to be like, it has to be considered right away. Well, I'm actually not sure how much it can be corrected. I just said that because I imagine it can be, right? But
yeah. I mean, I don't think you want to take it as like it can't be corrected at all, because there's a lot of evidence of neuroplasticity of the brain being able even to improve. I think what's interesting here is to adapt, and also the body. Like, even there's evidence of like if malnutrition, obviously malnutrition can make you shorter or your organs not develop properly. But there's evidence of that if a while of malnutrition within a certain critical period, if then you feed, the person gets appropriate nutrition, they can catch up with their, to a certain degree, maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, but I mean, the finer point. But I do think that you don't want to sort of rule out the possibility of hope or so.
Right.
And I think it's interesting to relate to the learning difficulties, right? So I do think, though, it can make it difficult, right? So for someone, like, so if you think about it in the way that the person actually needs to learn, let's say how to adapt and how to develop skills, and if not, they could also, and how to stress coping mechanisms, right? But you can, in these cases of people that might need therapy or might need more help or special help, intensive help, you can see, like, if they start having problems with their memory, with their ability to learn, it might be hard for them on their own to sort of get out and get out of a bad situation,
Right.
And learn new skills that they might need to get to a better situation and meet their needs.
I mean, the physical ones are like, they show that this is like the emotional part is completely linked as well to the physical well-being. But the mental pathologies or difficulties really point out how important it is, because if we want someone to have good judgment, to take good decisions in their lives, to not become a mass shooter, right? That's like the extreme, poor judgment. But that's what we're talking about here. Like we want to improve people's judgment, their empathy, and to reduce their impulsivity. All of these things, that's what we really need, right? And to accomplish that, we need to reduce their levels of stress, and that means we need to meet their emotional needs.
Yeah, and I think, again, and this it's a bit complicated, it touches on other issues, but the thing about whether you can correct for it or not, I think, so when you look at things statistically and you look at a lot of people, you can see these negative effects of a whole bunch of factors, right? But then when you look individually, it's when they start to talk about resilience, and you have cases of people that have had very bad situations and have done very well, or maybe at some point they started doing apparently very well and so on, and had success in different areas, socially or in sports or so on, right? Mm-hmm. Or all sorts of different areas. So and that's why, I mean, I don't think you can rule out the possibility of people overcoming difficulties, and I don't think you want to either.
Which is why we don't agree with the strategy of saying that there isn't any free will, right? That's basically one of the reasons why we don't like that strategy, because telling people that they don't have the capacity, the agency to change their lives is basically oppressive, and it makes that a lot more difficult.
If they don't believe they can actually improve their situation.
Right.
That's the kind of thinking that leads to depression and so on, in psychology. Yeah.
So just, another example is when, we wonder if people, instead of asking whether people deserve something, it's what do they need? So a lot of the things, like, typically when people talk about the problems in the world, they'll typically say that the problem in the world is greed, right? That's typically what people say. But when we understand fundamental human needs, when we understand these, we realize that the problem usually is it's not that like what is greed? Like we can analyze that and think about that. What is greed? Well, greed is so it's like an addiction, right? It's an addiction. And what is an addiction? It's a pathology. And so what's going on here is that the person has a need, right, that they don't understand. They don't understand what their need is. And so they're trying to satisfy that need by filling in, with what they know how to fill, right? So like with food, well, they know how to fill, to put things in their mouth, so they just keep eating, right? But there's a hole that they're trying to fill, and it's not hunger. It's an emotional need. And when people understand, and the same with greed, right? There's something that there's one of the needs that they are trying to satisfy, and they're not succeeding in satisfying it, so they just keep trying to satisfy it with more and more money. When we understand, then we can solve that.
Yeah, and I think just thinking about money and greed here, I think money is one of those concepts that it seems very simple, but it's actually pretty complicated. But I think it's interesting to point out that money in our society, it's how people are able to meet their physical needs, their emotional needs in great degree, and also help others to meet their needs too. So money. Yes. So often sometimes money. If you're just greed for the money, why do people want the money? Well, it can help them meet their need for security, all their physical needs, but also a bunch of social needs that they have, and the people around them, right? If they're providing for others.
Absolutely, and that's something that we probably will talk about in other podcasts and stuff. Is how that's a significant problem, because it just cultivates a greed. It makes us all greedy in a sense, because that's the only way we can meet our needs. And it puts us in this rat race that we can't escape, to compete against each other to satisfy our needs. And that's basically what we're talking about in the beginning, right? It was like, so we in this society today, we are forced to sacrifice the long-term good of the world, the environment, or the social well-being, so that we can get ahead in the competition for job, for clients, or for land, right? And so we kind of don't have a choice, even though there's always a choice, which is why we like to agree that there is free will. There's always choice, but it makes it really hard. We're always really pushed, because if we aren't getting ahead, we will get behind, and if and those that get behind will lose in the race for the money, and so we won't be able to meet our needs. And so that's why we're so desperate, and we can't. We have to cut corners everywhere, basically.
Yeah, the other thing about just another way to think about the choice thing. So if you have a bunch of situation which sort of makes it hard for something, even if there is the possibility that some people make different choices, you can sort of assume that in a large population, not everybody will.
Right. And statistically thinking.
And so if you think about it as a problem, you can still think of it as a problem, that those factors are going to be a problem, independently.
Because it'll increase the amount of people that are going to make that choice.
Yeah.
Or decrease it.
Every time there's a choice, you can sort of assume that some people will make, especially if the circumstances incentivize one thing, that some people are going to choose one way, some people are going to choose the other,
So what's also, this is another interesting thing, that is to understand that needs are also what guide and motivate people, right? And so it's not only that needs are something that you have to provide to people, which that's true, but people will also direct their activity to try to meet these needs. And so this is the framework that I think his name was Alexander Maslow, or
Maslow's pyramid.
Maslow's pyramid of needs, which is one of the first people to start talking about the idea of human needs. And a lot of people know his framework, right? So the idea is that according to him, people this is what motivates people. And first, people are motivated to get their physiological needs met, and then their safety needs met. And then once they have that, then they can start thinking about their social needs and their more spiritual needs after that, and self-actualization and all that, right? So now it was a great framework, and a lot of people, like, it really helped the whole understanding of needs to start in a direction. And what's interesting about it is that, so human needs, nowadays, people don't consider there to be actual hierarchy. Okay, so emotional needs are as important as the physical needs, and this is why people are willing to sacrifice their lives. They'll blow themselves up, and why is that? Well, it's because that for them, it's a bad judgment, absolutely bad judgment, but they're doing it in a circumstance that they see that as a way that they are going to satisfy some other need. And the other need is a need of belonging, a need of participation, a need of something that they're satisfying these needs, trying to, and then they're led to a behavior that completely goes against their physiological needs. And so this is also important to understand, because when it's kind of like what we were saying earlier. So, like, if people don't understand their needs, or their needs are not being met, they will often be misguided, because they don't really know where to go, or they're just going to become desperate and going to try all sorts of different things. So that's the thing is as well. So, like, people, not only people are passive, and if you don't give them like a plant, like you give them everything they need, they're not going to grow, but they're actually going to go in the wrong direction, which is kind of like what you were saying earlier. Like people are going to go in the wrong direction, do all these terrible things because their needs are not met, but because they're trying to meet their needs, but they don't know how, they don't have the understanding, the judgment, the opportunity. And so this is something that will also lead to other directions in the conversation. But what I was trying to say here is that understanding this can be useful in understanding not only why people behave in erratic ways, but also what makes people will behave in prosocial ways. People do have a tendency to want to contribute to the world, to be kind, to help their neighbors. And part of that is because they are seeking to satisfy some of these needs that are social needs, that are self-actualization needs. Yeah, and I don't know if you have something to say.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking, it reminded me of a podcast I saw recently with Joe Griffin, and they were talking about, and you can have, I think they were talking about depression. You might have someone who at some point they start playing the role of a victim, right? Or they start socially behaving in a way that's not constructive for themselves. And it might even be not constructive or destructive or negative for other people, right? And if you think about that, can be a negative. That is probably, it's not a good idea generally. But if you think about evolutionarily where this comes from, you can think that as a child, maybe a child might do that, and then the parent might step in. It could be a way for calling for help, right? Or for, like you were talking about, someone blowing themselves up. I mean, obviously that's a bit too far, but someone getting a tantrum, or just spazzing out or something, it can be a way to call for attention. Just like a baby crying, right? Mm-hmm. A baby crying in the crib, they can throw things and so on. It's a way to call for attention, to call for help, mm-hmm. right? And in some societies, or up to a certain age, it can actually work, right? And then the parent might step in and do whatever it takes to give the child whatever they need, or intervene, right? And in some societies also, it might even be
like
a way,
people when they light themselves on fire.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm comparing it to. Yeah. But in the case of, obviously, so you can think of it that way. You can also think of it, you might think in some societies, these kinds of, if you light yourself on fire, you die. But in some trying, or some of these sort of victim or self-destructive kind of things, in some societies, they might even still work, even if you're not a child, in the sense that people around you might be like, hey, what's wrong with Bill, right? And as a society, or as a tribe, or so on, they might be, okay, we need to do something to help him. Because look, mm-hmm. they might start paying attention. Oh, look, he's not able to hunt anymore. or he broke his leg, or whatever, or
he fell asleep in the ditch and he's like, oh wait, he's like, he's drinking way too much. Like, and that people do that.
Yeah, and they
right?
could,
like,
and they might intervene and help them out. You know what I mean?
Right.
So like, it's like if someone's in some of these societies, it's like if your barn burns down and then all the neighbors get together and they make you a new barn. You know what I mean? And I think and that might fix the problem. But I think in some of what they were the individualistic societies, or in society where people don't have anyone they know around them that can actually step in and help them, then maybe all those self-destructive behaviors, then they're really not helpful, because it won't send the signal. That it might be that some of these things instinctively, like they're meant to send a signal out to other people. But the other thing is that when they do talk about that, it's possible that when someone really their emotional needs, their need for meaning, or the need for love and belonging, like they talk about here, the need for selfish status, recognition. So a lot of these things are safety, right? Personal safety, personal security. If all these needs, it might be so painful that at some point someone actually just chooses that to stop. It's just too painful, right? And that's another way to understand like these kind of suicidal behaviors.
Yes, the suicidal behavior. Yeah. There's also another point that this reminds me of is so recently I've discovered, thanks to the Moneyless Society podcast, thank you Marlo, I learned about it's a new theory of needs as well, contemporary. And it is called self-determination theory. And so this is it's very similar to what was pretty popularized a few years ago, with this idea that so that what motivates people, I think his name was Daniel Pink or something. It was called Drive. It was a pretty popular book. And the idea is that, okay, so they reduced the needs to 3, and but they basically, what the idea is that it's similar, but it's more aimed at like what is it that motivates people to be their best and to learn or to act or to act or to do things. And it's the idea that the best is when an activity like the what is it called, the motivators are intrinsic motivators instead of extrinsic. And these motivators are, or at least, sorry, the ones I remember are the ones of Drive, which are not exactly the same ones. It's the need to improve, self-improve. I think it says mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And so these are, I think one of these is supposed to be connection. I think purpose is connection in the self-determination theory. And so what it is that these are like what make people, like it's what drives people. It's what makes people embark in activities and make efforts for things. And so it's kind of like this maps a bit over as well with the ideas of self-actualization of Maslow's theory. And I think it also kind of maps a bit with the human needs theory, doesn't it?
Well, it's related. I think a lot of these frameworks, there are different ways, different language, different terms to talk about certain needs that then you could try to classify, or sometimes there are categories that are related or overlap, right? So if you talk about self-improvement, that can tie into meaning, learning skills. It can also tie into status, right? Because you can improve your status and so on. So I think a lot of these things, they sort of are related to other terms and other frameworks.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think what these ideas like Drive and also self-determination theory, I think in mostly they're like looking at work environments. Mm-hmm. And what is it that for people to work at their best, what are, like, when is it that they work at their best, and what is it that they want to work on, and this is what they found, right? That's what really makes people work creatively and have ingenuity and to work really hard, is when it's themselves, they're internally motivated, and they're motivated, that's what they're seeking, to get better, and they like the fact that they're autonomous, that they're the one that are deciding what to do and how to do it, and that it has a purpose, right? Or that it's connected with others. So like it's part of a group that are doing it together.
Yeah, for sure. And I think a lot of these things in like business environments, I mean, maybe some of these things the business might have a cynical approach to it, but you are seeing more and more in businesses that they try to identify the purpose of the business, or as you increase, as you get like you might be motivated. They might try to incentivize people that in another higher position they'll have more control, and so on. These are things that in workplaces, and some of them, maybe not all of them, they're trying to implement, even though maybe in some cases it's hypocritical or cynical, depending on who implements it. Yeah.
So I've been talking all about, we've been talking about these needs the whole time, but fundamental needs. Well, what are they? Okay, so the Manfred Max Neef framework is the following: that there's freedom, subsistence, protection, affection, understanding, participation, leisure, creation, and identity. He identified these 9 different needs, and that these are all the needs that people have, but we need them all. So what often people don't realize is typically people just think of like the physiological ones, which is basically what like Maslow's like lowest rung. It's like, those are basic needs. People talk about basic needs. But that's kind of like what the challenge is with the idea of the Maslow framework, is that people think, oh, well, once then that people have to kind of like look for the other ones themselves, right? But no, that's not the way it works. Like if someone is lacking affection, right, they will develop a pathology as well, and they will become either a burden or a danger to society, because they will start either getting sick or becoming mentally ill and start having all sorts of bad judgment and taking bad decisions. And these are the type of situations where people become violent or dangerous. And it could be affection, but it could be any of these, right? So affection, so I'll repeat them again: affection, understanding, participation, leisure. This one is interesting as well, because often people kind of like nowadays, people are like, oh, but why is he complaining? Or why are they like depressed? Why are, they have all their physical needs met more than anyone throughout all history, so they shouldn't be complaining, right? No, like people need time off. Like they physiologically need time off. If not, they will develop a pathology. Creation, which is kind of like the autonomy thing that we were talking about earlier, like the idea. So being able to create new things and use our imagination. Identity. So this is another social one. So some of these are like social, and I think others would like blend them into the social one. But identity, which is kind of something that we see often why people get into like this tribal mindset, right? It's because there's an actual need for identity, and they satisfy that need by identifying themselves with a certain, with being they're of the left, right? They're part of the left, and so that's their identity. And so they need that. They actually physiologically need an identity with which to understand, who they are. And freedom. So freedom is another one that I think is very important, that people have to understand nowadays, that freedom. So often a lot of these things, people understand them as like, people talk about them as human rights. But that framework isn't grounded on anything that it's philosophical. And I think that that's a serious problem, because we've seen people, saying that human rights don't exist. Like a right is something that doesn't exist, because it's a philosophical idea, right? And that's a serious problem. It's better if we talk about these things as human needs. We find out what they are, and freedom is a human need. And exactly how we can satisfy that need is something that we can learn and develop and practice and study, right? But people do need freedom. Like, you can't just say, oh no, you don't have free will, so you don't really need to be free. We can dictate what you can do, what you can't do, what you put in your body, what you don't put in your body, where you go, where you can't go, because no one's really free anyway, right? No. Freedom is a fundamental human need, and if not, people will develop pathologies.
Yeah, and I think a lot of these things, you can look at social mammals, and at different levels, and you can already identify a lot of these needs in them, or their version of them. And maybe humans that they've sort of refined them, or they've made it another level of complexity and so on. But a lot of these needs, like protection, affection, participation, even in social mammals, leisure. I mean, you'd have to define that, but yeah, they definitely need time to relax and to play, right?
Playing.
Playing,
playing is part
relaxing,
of leisure, and it's shown to be something that's absolutely needed for proper development.
Resting, also, leisure is also related with social activities. I don't know. You'd have to define them or think about but you can already start to see these with a lot of social animals. Identity too, of course, subsistence for sure, and freedom. Like, if it's like you. Again, like, I was just thinking of recently I just heard in a recent podcast, Joe Griffin, he was talking about that when he was what inspired him for the human givens approach was going to a zoo and looking at a lion that was just totally depressed and was just pacing back and forth, and he could just see that it was just physically, it looked depressed, and it just looked like it was just not psychologically well, right? Because it's in this is a closed environment, and doesn't have all its needs, its emotional needs being met, right? And I think that's one of the reasons zoos are increasingly unpopular now, because people are sort of recognizing that. But what I mean is, you can already see that with a lot of animals, right?
Yeah.
If not, animals would just be happy in a zoo, right? Because you just give, they have water and then food,
right,
and so
exactly.
on. It doesn't matter. And why do they not reproduce? It's like these they try to get the animals to reproduce in zoos, and they don't, right? So you can already see a lot of these emotional needs already there in animals.
Yeah, the reproduction thing is a very clear one, because that's a typical problem with captured animals or domestic animals,
And they have to, in zoos, what they have to do is sedate a lot of them, so that they don't self-harm and they don't attack each other too.
Oh, wow. So that's what they're feeding them, huh?
Yeah, typically. A lot of the different animals, yeah.
Yeah, that's too bad.
Anyway, I don't want to make it too depressing, but I think it's a helpful metaphor to also just see these needs, right?
Yeah. That these are not just like random. They're not just
it's
random
scientific.
whims.
It's something you can look at biology or animal psychology, animal neuroscience, behavior.
Right.
And you can see a lot of these things. It's a good framework also to start to understand them in humans, I think.
Right.
And to see the scientific basis for it. Yeah.
Thanks for watching. We will continue to talk about fundamental human needs in more episodes, because this is how to foster compassion and generosity throughout society. Once people understand that practically everybody will be a benefit to society if all their needs are met, and absolutely everybody will be a burden or a danger to society if their needs aren't met, then all of humanity can share the goal of meeting everyone's fundamental needs. This is how we will become a global family living in harmony and end war, poverty, and environmental destruction, because all of our conflicts and competitions for power and wealth are fueled by the requirement to sacrifice the long-term common welfare for the short-term advantage in our competition to earn a living so that we can meet our needs. Once people understand it is in everybody's advantage to meet everybody's needs, we no longer will have to play this deadly version of musical chairs, and we can finally all be on the same team. Team Human. Please tell us what you think. Do you agree this is possible? Do you think I'm crazy? What else do you think we need to do? Remember to like, subscribe, and share this video, because raising awareness is how we create protopia. Find us here at the Human Needs Podcast, and find our community at prosocialize.org. And as always, invest in the commons and enjoy a shared world.